journey is quite different. It doesn't proceed from stage to stage in a neat fashion. It's definitely not linear. It feels like we're going around in circles, thinking we have resolved the crisis only to have it return or be superseded by a different unexpected crisis. And certainly with COVID-19, you may be dropping off your loved one at the hospital and they will allow the person to come in, but you have to stop outside the door. And for some hours, you may not know whether he or she is going to be admitted, given a test, or sent back out and told to quarantine. So it begins with the kind of uncertainty that caregivers always feel. And the question is not if you'll be asked to provide as a family caregiver. All of us who have a loved one or a friend, a relative, who is symptomatic and has to go to the hospital to beg to be tested, will want a caregiver to go with them. And unfortunately, in this situation, most of us will be stopped at the door. We can't go into the emergency room, obviously, but even the normal entrance of the hospital, you need a pass, and you probably won't get one unless you're a really good BSer, and some people are and will get a pass to go on to the next level. But if not, how you will respond as a caregiver makes all the difference in your own survival and in how your loved one feels supported. So I likened this situation that I had with my husband for some years when he had cancer. I mean, the way it came to me was in the usual abrupt way. I got the call in a beauty salon. It's not benign. Not benign, I responded dumbly. The cyst on Mr. Felker's neck. It's not benign. The caller was my husband's surgeon, blunter than ever. But 2 years ago, after the biopsy, you told us the pathologist recut the old biopsy slides. It's cancer. Cancer, we know, is cruel, implacable, perverse. It tricks the smartest oncologists and defeats brilliant surgeons. The supposedly benign tumor had come back, bigger than ever. Weeks flew by as I tracked down doctors, compared hospitals, scavenged the internet for alternatives. And then it began to dawn on me that my life too had changed radically. I had a new role, family caregiver, a role I wasn't prepared for. Nobody briefs us on this role. Well, in my 1976 book, Passages, I traced the journey of life stages in a linear fashion. And later I wrote a book about the caregiver's journey, which is very different. The question is really not if you will be called at some point to act as a family caregiver. It's just when and how you will respond. Well, in this crisis, it's really cruel for the caregiver more than ever, because it's likely when you take your loved one to the emergency room because he or she is having sore throat and headache and scratchy throat and other symptoms and wants to be admitted. And you have to leave that person at the door of the emergency room, unless you go in the normal door and beg for a pass, which you probably won't get. So it's a pretty harrowing way to start your role as a caregiver. And your loved one may come out rejected for admission or for a test, and happy to be rejected for a test and sent home to quarantine for a couple of weeks. So then you are actually in your role as the caregiver, and you can be extremely helpful to your loved one, but you also have a lot of anxiety. You maybe wake up in the morning and you don't think you slept all night, and maybe you didn't because you feel like you're always on call. And in some ways you are, but that's one of the things I want to stress, because the worst thing that can happen is that the caregiver gets sick. The caregiver gets sick from the virus, or just the caregiver gets sick from being overtired, overstressed, feeling helpless, which is a very natural course of feelings. So right from the beginning, you really have to start thinking about how to care for yourself. It's not selfish. It is the best thing you can do for your loved one and yourself, because you can't both go down over this illness. So one of the ways I think about it is walking around a labyrinth. A labyrinth, as you know, if you do know them, they're a spiral. And if you start at one end, you start going around the outside, and then the first thing you know, you're reversed and you're going backwards. And that's kind of surprising and disorienting. And as you go around the labyrinth, unbelievably, it organizes the chaos. And so you do come to the middle. You do come to a point of maybe some understanding, some sense of intervention by your uh, whomever you worship, or through your meditation practice. And then you begin coming out of the labyrinth, which takes another long time. But in that last back half of coming out of the labyrinth, that is the point at which your loved one may actually be admitted to the hospital, and may go through treatment, and may not come out. And when that seems to be where things are going, that's when you have to really work on saving yourself, saving the caregiver, saving the person who feels responsible for what's happening, which so many of us do when a loved one becomes ill. So it's a double process. And I just want to prepare you for the fact that one half of it is saving yourself. If you become attached to your loved one who gets sick and maybe gets sicker and is in the hospital for a long time, maybe does come out or maybe doesn't. If you stay entirely attached to your loved one on that journey, you may not come back yourself, because you can wear yourself out so fast, and your immune system can plunge, your faith in whatever deity you believe in may be crushed. A lot of very bad things can happen to the caregiver. So my basic message is that once a loved one actually has been diagnosed and has to either go through some treatment or shelter in place for a certain amount of time before they can be tested, you need to begin taking care of yourself. That's really important. The worst thing is if your loved one and you both don't come out of this nightmare alive. You have to be the one who comes out alive, so you can take care of other people and forgive yourself for not being able to intervene in something that nobody knows how to really correct. So that's the first thing I want you to understand, because how you respond from the beginning in not taking full responsibility for this, which no one can, and some of our politicians don't even bother, you will be likely to survive as a caregiver. So I use this labyrinth as a way of thinking about the different stages of being a caregiver. So the entrance to it is the shock and mobilization of a frightening diagnosis. And you mobilize, you start sprinting, you're grabbing for answers. Uh, it's dizzying. Time speeds up and you're working off adrenaline day and night. You begin chasing facts and opinions and you run into contradictions. And of course, you will feel disoriented. Your emotions obviously will run wild. You may wake up to the first light of morning in a sweat, convinced you never slept, and maybe you never did. To start the day more calmly, your mother told you this, I'm sure, but I'm telling you again, I know this helps. Try breathing exercises. Give yourself at least 10 minutes to sit in the dark, not in bed, but in a chair with a nice pillow. Try breathing slowly, deeply from down in the diaphragm. Hold it and slowly exhale. That very first breath and exhale begins to put your body on relaxation. And then you do it again. And you want to probably focus on one word or a phrase or a mantra, or try a statement of gratitude, like, thank you for this day. Some may want to say, thank you, God, for this day. Or more realistically, you might say, thanks, who asked for this day? Humor is okay in meditation. The one thing you want to avoid is letting your monkey brain keep talking to you about what you're worried about. That you have to let go, let it pass, breathe again, come up with a word or a phrase that keeps your mind focused. You don't say it, you just think it, and then you do another breath. And believe me, if every one of you could do that for 10 minutes every morning, it is really a lifesaver. I know, because I took a mindfulness course and I, like everybody else, was a little fidgety about getting into something you have to do every morning when you're so hurried, you want to do everything on your to-do list. But boy, it really slowed me down and helped me to get through the rough spots in the day. And then eventually, if you do have a loved one who is symptomatic and has been sent home to self-isolate for 6 weeks or whatever, you are going to be the family caregiver. And normally, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, but it may be a sprint in this case. There might also be a welcome reprieve. You may get to a doctor and they tell you, your loved one doesn't have severe enough symptoms to be even tested. And they send both of you home, and then you can stay there for some weeks until some symptoms do appear, or more symptoms do appear, or not, blessedly. But there are great boosts to the immune system that you can do for your loved one, especially if he or she is living in a different part of the country. Get your parents online or on Facebook or Twitter, set up their profile, take them on virtual virtual trips. There are these wonderful trips that you can go, up and down the Alps or on a road trip, and that really is helpful since we have to stay indoors. And you and the person you're caring for, by doing these kinds of exercises together, will create new pathways in your brains by participating in unfamiliar activities. And the more your brains are stimulating with things other than thinking about a virus, the better the body will respond with natural mood elevators. So after once tested or sent home to wait until symptoms are more severe before being tested, things settle down into somewhat normal routine, and you may be handling it thinking, okay, I can do this. And then, boomerang, a couple of weeks later, a new crisis erupts, and those original symptoms roar out of hibernation, and they look more severe. So now the family member you've been taking care of, you have to step up and try to get them to the hospital. Now, you're not always going to be in the same city unless you have, gotten to the point of sheltering in place with one another and with your family, which I think a lot of people are doing in these days. So the original illness or symptoms have roared out of hibernation. You're in this boomerang, and then your loved one maybe suffers a surprise setback, and the symptoms are worse. And this time they may be strong enough to get the patient taken into the hospital and at least evaluated. And this is a turning you've already made, but now you're back at the shock and mobilization stage. And this time you definitely need to, count on your physician as your medical quarterback who will help assemble a team and call the plays. You certainly want to explore some complementary non-medical treatments that can boost the patient's immune system and foster a positive attitude. Of course, it's essential now to call a family meeting and get everybody involved, since it's now clear this may be a chronic and possibly fatal health condition. And so now is the time to begin seriously caring for yourself. You need to shift out of crisis mode and into a healthier gear. Then there's another phase. I call it playing God. Very quickly, you become a seasoned caregiver. You're good at it. You're the only person your loved ones trust. People say you're heroic, and you're beginning to believe it. You're playing God. And it's natural that you would feel that way. But the truth is that we can't control disease or aging. And if we keep trying, and we'll be overcome by stress and fatigue. And actually, it's likely that we might begin to feel we are like God, because we're the only one who is really, watching everything about our loved one and trying as hard as we can to get them the treatment they need as soon as they can have it. So that kind of leads to failure or possible failure, because we're not God. Hello, what a revelation. And the failure will feel like our own. And so eventually we have to accept that some things are totally beyond our control. And certainly we have been dimmed with that reality every hour of the day for months now. But we can change one thing: our own attitude. So you might get to a point where you think, I can't do this anymore. I'm really tired out, and I just don't know what I can do to make this better. Well, one day you break into tears, you're totally fatigued, you've given up so much, you're cracking, and you absolutely must come up for air, or you might go down in despair. Call for help. You, as a caregiver, need help. And you will have friends. I'm sure you are connecting with friends in your part of New York or wherever you are. And do keep connecting with friends, because that's when you can call on them when you're at your wit's end and you just need somebody to pull you up. So let's say you break into tears, you're totally fatigued, you've given up so much. And so you call for help, And with imagination, you can pull together a care team of your own from within our uh, community. And you and another person can act as a care team for one another. Because you can't, it's really hard to get through this alone as a caregiver. Uh, you need to take breaks, carve out at least an hour every day that where you do something that really gives you pleasure and refreshment. The obvious thing is to take a walk. I know they're saying you shouldn't even go into Central Park to take a walk. Well, I'm sorry, but there are some things you just can't give up. And it seems to me that's one of them. And we're blessed to have that park near us. And I think if you steer clear of any, congregation of people, which there really isn't, I actually am going there on Saturday to um, do a training with my trainer, whose fee at the Equinox has now come down to $50 for a session in the park. So I show up there with and have it's a great relief. And then, but maybe you know you can still have coffee with a friend sitting outside at some distance. Bring your own coffee and sit outside. Uh, you can um, the bookstore, the Shakespeare and Company bookstore is still open, believe it or not. And now you can call, order a book, and they will bring it to the door. And boy, books are going to be one of our saving graces during this time. I've gotten about 5 of them. I probably won't, well, maybe I will read them all, depending on how long this lasts. Um, listen to music. That's one of the best things we can do, and you can get it on all different frequencies, and it's very calming. Um, chop wood. Well, we don't get much chance to do that in New York. Outside we do, but something equivalent to that kind of really physical activity that maybe you can do if you go to the park really early, and kind of bang away at something, or take uh, those bands and do your stretching, and with those bands you can, there's bars in the behind the Cabin on the Green that are like ballet bars. You can stretch on them, stretch your back, stretch forward, stretch your legs, and just be sure to take your alcohol and swab it down beforehand and your fingers down afterhand. But if you go early enough, I think that's a very good way of, just getting the kinks out of your body, because we're all going to get kinky. Um, let's see. Oh, I wish we had a labyrinth. I really do. But let me just continue with that metaphor. So there's a coming back. And this is if it becomes clear that your loved one is not going to get well. And this I see as the center of the labyrinth. At the center of the labyrinth, you stop, you contemplate, and you may come up with a different attitude towards life given the walk you've taken so far. So people often say, I can't wait to get my old life back. But that's not the way it happens. You're going to be changed by this long passage. We all are. God knows we may be changed in ways that we won't even recognize ourselves once we're out of this. You can't go back to your old self. And the middle of your journey around the labyrinth is time to begin thinking about coming back to find a new self. We're all going to have to do that. I know it sounds selfish, but the reality is you must continue on the path of life. And your loved one, if they're sick, is on a different path. There's peril in remaining so attached to your loved one if he or she is declining, that you lose yourself and go down to the person who cannot come back. That's my biggest section of my book about passages in caregiving. Too many long-term caregivers retreat into isolation or addiction or depression, or they line up outside of the 67th Street wine store, as I saw today, and fill up with a lot of alcohol, which may or may not be useful. Caregivers sometimes set up their own illness or accident unconsciously, wishing to be taking care of themselves. So it's at the center of the labyrinth of caregiving that we need to begin releasing our loved one if it looks like they are not going to come back. Relaxing our attachment allows us to begin receiving images of our own new life, even in the sorrow. And it makes it maybe easier to begin the anticipating the grief of loss. This is the time to resist isolation, really. I mean, meet somebody in the park at a long distance if you can. But reach out to replenish your emotional attachments, even if it's over the phone or by email. Because connecting with other loved ones or other caregivers who will understand your situation will allow you to help one another. And what were your lifelines before caregiving? Remember your former transports to joy, whether in work or play. And some of them you can revive. Some of them you can actually do sports in your own home over Wii. And you might want to renew your efforts to find spiritual guidance. We all need some higher power to whom we can turn over our burdens and direct our prayers or meditations. And asking for that reassurance might help you find a way out of the labyrinth towards hope. So then I think of the in-between stage. This is a momentous turning point for people who care for the chronically ill. Your loved one, say, can't be cured, but he or she is not ready to die. And this is, unfortunately, the place where many of us as caregivers of loved ones who go into the hospital will find themselves. And our healthcare system has little to offer us as caregivers at this stage, especially during this COVID virus. I've been talking to nurses at Weill Cornell Hospital, and they say, really, there's very little you can do if you drop your loved one off at the emergency room after that. Because if they're admitted, the halls of the hospital are virtually almost empty. There are doctors, there are some nurses, because there isn't enough protective gear for many personnel. So they're like almost empty corridors. Nobody can take anything into a patient. So, sending gifts or anything like that is out of the question because they can't be delivered. So it's very hard other than by phone or by Skype. And most people who would be admitted to the hospital probably won't be feeling well enough to do anything complicated like that. So it may just be phone or what we're doing here tonight. And I did hear from this wonderful nurse in Weill Cornell that there's very little you can do as a caregiver if and when your loved one is taken into the hospital and into a bed. They won't feel like doing much, and you, just like nurses, can't get anywhere near anybody with the virus in the hospital. So that's when you really have, not then, even earlier than that, you have to start preparing yourself with taking care of yourself. It's not selfish. There's very little you can do. You can't see the patient. You may be able to talk to them if they're still well enough to talk. But there's actually virtually nothing much you can do once a patient is taken into the hospital, and that comes from a nurse at Weill Cornell. That's a really, really sad blow to hear, but it's the fact. So that's why you have to start early in this journey before your loved one is declared really sick, to start taking care of yourself, because this becomes a mutual caregiving situation. You and your loved one both have to work at this. And don't be shy about asking for assistance from neighbors or coworkers or members of the church you belong to or the synagogue. Even though it's closed, you have their emails. So ask them for help or support. I think the more we do that, the more we put ourselves out there to do that, and the more people respond, the better we're going to feel, because nobody likes sitting at home alone on a Friday night, just listening to somebody babble about caregiving and saying you can hardly do any of it. But what else would we be doing? We'd be listening to the latest, bulletin by our governor, who's really been pretty great. But sometimes I just would like to see something else, and I'm trying to get Zulu so I can get Hillary's documentary, but I just can't do it. I hope somebody will email me and let me know how to do that. So I think you need to expand the circle of people who will assume some responsibilities for care for you, in getting you food and getting you more hand sanitizer if they can find it anywhere in the Isle of Manhattan. And if you're elderly, like I am, people are going to have to be bringing you some stuff, because there's very little stuff out there, but you shouldn't be walking around trying to find it. I actually am going to decamp to Sag Harbor and stay with my ancient bow out there, because I don't really feel all that comfortable in Manhattan. I love it. I've been sheltering at home, doing all the right things, I think. But since I have an opportunity to go someplace where I can look at water, I'm choosing to do that. And I think a lot of you are also thinking about those kinds of things. The last turning is really tough. The last turning in the labyrinth of caregiving. No one can answer your most burning question, which is, how long? Inevitably, there will be times when you sense or see your loved one suffering that you'll feel, why can't you die? It's enough. Don't feel guilty if you feel that way. Of course, you'll feel guilty, but it's entirely human and predictable. And it's important at that turning to have end-of-life conversations. Find ways to encourage your loved one to talk about his or her goals for this precious last stage of life. Maybe suggest a life review. Talk about what has given his or her life meaning and what they will have passed on. You may be able to bring into the phone conference or video conference, a spiritual confidant, a religious or pastoral person, to talk about how to find peace in coming to the end of life. And what kind of medical interventions does he or she want or discontinued? There aren't very many choices, but there are some, and it's respectful to ask what a person really prefers. So I can only stop by saying there is living through caregiving, there's coming back after caregiving, and there is life after caregiving. And I wish you the best on the road if you have to walk it.
Thank you, Gail, for those very beautiful insights, thoughts, the work that you've explored. So difficult, uncomfortable, and at times unsatisfying, but it's a real part of life. Since it seems like we have an intimate group here, I'd like to open it up to anybody that wants to share some of their own thoughts or ask questions. I'm going to try to unmute folks, and excuse me if I'm awkward in this age of Zoom, but I've unmuted everybody, and some folks we could see, some folks we can't, but please y'all, I mean, we have a small group, so let's share thoughts and questions for anybody.
So good evening. This is Annette. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. I'm going to put on my video too. I want to just thank you, Gail, for your guidance. I'm not in a position right now where I'm taking care of anyone elderly, but a month ago I ended up in the hospital in an ER. Actually, today's my 1-month anniversary, and a lot of what you talked about in terms of feeling alone and how you connect with people really resonated with me. So thank you for sharing that. I'm looking forward to reading Passages, your new book. I have your old book that I've been reading. So this is really, really great to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. We also have with us, State Senator Brad Hoylman. He seems like he's logged on. I'm not sure if he's still there.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, and thank you, Senator, for joining us. And I'm not sure how much time Zoom is going to give us, but we would love your thoughts on all this, and also your thoughts on the advocacy that you've been working so hard for the community.
Sure. Let me just say first, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You know, hearing from Gail Sheehy like that is like amazing to me. So that is a public service in and of itself, and she literally wrote the book on caregiving. So I'm just grateful to hear her words, and we'll take them to heart. You know, that book is a treasure that everyone should have on their shelf. So thank you for all of your work in that regard. It's so hard to be mindful during this time, given the uncertainty that's, you know, just unfolding before us. And as an elected official, I feel the same way as I know your neighbors do. We don't know what's next. The modeling, you know, that you hear on MSNBC or elsewhere, it can be really daunting to consider. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, Gail, I'd love to ask you, like, how do you cope with the worst case scenario, which we see, you know, described almost on a daily basis, either on television or in the New York Times?
Well, I haven't run into a worst case scenario with any of my family or friends so far, and I'm sure I will. But I think it must be excruciating, because I just keep seeing this picture of taking an elderly person like myself to the emergency room and having to let him or her slip inside without me. That to me is the most tragic part of it. And I would have to wait outside for a few hours to see whether they reject him. And if he doesn't come out, I won't probably hear from him again. So I'll have to try to call him. And that the whole brutality of that door shutting in the emergency room and blocking us from seeing or hearing about our loved one for some hours or more is the most frightening aspect of it all. And then from then on, I mean, unless they're sent home to quarantine, which would be, I'm sure everybody would feel miraculous, you probably won't hear from them again, because if they're taken in, it means they're really sick and they're not going to feel like, jumping on the phone. So you may be able to reach them, but it's a very sharp cutoff for many people. But I know that so many other people wait outside that emergency room door for 3 hours or 4, and your loved one comes back out to just, be in quarantine for 6 weeks. So, there is a hope waiting outside there that, you'll have, time with your loved one to either experience the joy that he or she does not have the virus, or be with them for some weeks before it becomes worse. So it's a very much speeded up caregiving opportunity, but we at least may have one.
Yeah, I really appreciate that and the idea of living in the moment. And there's certainly, the tips you suggest about going to Central Park and, stretching and taking walks, all of that, we should be encouraging, our friends and neighbors and ourselves to do. Chris, I just wanted to mention, we've been going back and forth to Albany because, believe it or not, there's still government work to be done at the state level, and we are currently, preparing to vote on a budget, $180+ billion. We passed a paid sick leave package. We hope to provide some more relief, on the in terms of healthcare in the days ahead. We're dealing with, though, some resistance to raise revenues, which is always a problem, given that, if we were a nation, New York would have the 5th largest GDP in the world, ahead of South Korea and Mexico. But there's great reluctance to raise taxes, particularly during an economic downturn, which we're witnessing. But I think we have to push back on that, because
Absolutely.
we need a Marshall Plan, as it's been said, for every sector of our economy and human services network. The most vulnerable, the people on the end of the income ladder, the folks working 2 jobs and they've lost, one or both of them, and they have kids who are now at home because of school being closed. We got to help them, and I don't think $1,000 check in a couple of weeks is going to do it. So
No, that's right.
We have so much work to do at the state level because of what has been failing at the federal level. And I really do appreciate the governor's, forward stance on this pandemic. And, to the extent that, I can support his efforts. We gave him emergency powers a week ago, and a lot of us were reluctant, thinking, wow, that's something we haven't done ever in the history of New York State. But thankfully, we recognized, our colleagues, that this is an unusual, once in a century,
multiple lifetimes.
Right. We've never seen anything like it. So with those gubernatorial powers, which will expire in about 6 months, he has been able to do a lot of things, including allowing community boards and other groups that are subject to the open meetings law meet by Zoom, like we're doing here tonight, and vote by proxy, because that's something we're experiencing in Albany. Nobody wants to be in a room of 63, senators, because it's dangerous. It's not just dangerous to us as elected officials, but it's dangerous to our staff, most importantly.
Right.
And the people who we charge to do our work, for us. So I'm grateful for that. I've been working on pushing back on price gouging. I have legislation that would set a maximum of 10% that a retailer or distributor can raise a medical product, a consumer medical product, since the emergency declaration has been declared. That's important for consumers, but also for retailers who might be getting bilked by their distributors to know that 10% beyond that is unfair. So it'll also give the Attorney General new powers to prosecute people who are, selling hand sanitizers for $25 a bottle and the like, which has been so outrageous.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm working on, and then finally on the I'm chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I've written a letter to the governor asking that the statutes of limitations be paused for all criminal and civil actions, meaning during this period of
right.
I wouldn't call it interregnum, I don't know what you call it, of pandemic, that litigants, whether they're victims or people wishing to file claims, will have another shot after we pass through this very difficult period and go to court and won't be penalized because they couldn't find a lawyer, couldn't investigate a situation. And on the Child Victims Act, which I helped pass with Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal last year, that gave a 1-year look-back period for the adult survivors of child sexual abuse to go back in time and seek civil claims against their abusers or the institutions that may have harbored them. We want to extend that because there's 6 months left of that 1-year window, and it's not fair to them to say you have to do it between now and August, because the courts are basically not operating at any reasonable capacity, nor are so many offices. So I'm pushing for that. But I want to say that Jacob's on the phone. We've been doing a lot of constituent outreach in my office, and I encourage anyone on the line or any of your neighbors to call our office for employment issues, issues involving benefits and the like, disability, social services. We can help, and so we're really
that's wonderful.
Yeah, we've become basically a full-time, and Jacob can confirm this, a full-time constituent services operation. Which is really, I think, a way to transform our work into something that's useful during this.
Yeah, it's actually absolutely the way.
And on Sunday,
we should go back to the gathering and see if there's anybody else who has a question or can offer us some inspiration.
So thank you very much.
Thank
Chris,
you.
Gail, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Senator
Oh, it's
Hoylman.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, so we're closing in on that hour mark. Is there anybody else in the room that has any thoughts or anything that they'd like to offer? I'm unmuting microphones because I can't see you all. I think we're good. I think this was really beautiful. It's wonderful reading and talk back, and then to have the opportunity to hear the senator share what's going on in the state government and within our community. So thank you all. Zoom does this recording feature that we'll be able to look back at this and share it more broadly. And hopefully this is the first of many of these virtual discussions.
Thank you, Chris, for trusting me to be able to adjust to Zoom.
You did a great job. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for organizing this. This is fantastic.
Well, thank you for the support, and we'll all be in touch. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye.